Hello and welcome to Lyla's Lullabies, where we spend time exploring with Lyla, a traveler who wanders the world at her own pace, while sharing her most enriching and restorative moments with you. In tonight's story, we'll follow Lyla as she explores the vibrant city of Melbourne in Australia. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to remember. Just settle in, get comfortable, and let yourself go. We're so glad you're here. Whenever you're ready, let's begin. Lyla woke to the sound of trams clanging past her hotel window, that distinctive Melbourne sound that was part of the city's soundtrack, as essential as the Yarra River or the scent of coffee. April in Melbourne meant autumn, the season just beginning its transition, the weather still mild but with hints of the cooler months ahead, the light taking on that particular slanted quality that comes as the year turns. She opened her curtains to see the central business district spread before her, modern towers rising alongside Victorian-era buildings, the architectural layers of Melbourne's history visible in a single view. The sky was clear, promising a beautiful day for exploring, and she could see people already out on the streets below, the city awake and moving. After dressing in comfortable layers, Melbourne's weather was famously changeable, and she wanted to be prepared. She went down to the hotel's breakfast room. The coffee was excellent, as she'd expected. Melbourne took its coffee seriously, and even hotel coffee met high standards, rich and smooth, made with care. She ate a light breakfast of fruit and toast with Vegemite, wanting to try the iconic Australian spread. It was salty and intense, an acquired taste perhaps, but interesting, distinctly of this place. Other guests at nearby tables spoke in various accents: Australian, British, American, Asian languages she couldn't identify, Melbourne's cosmopolitan character evident even at breakfast. After eating, she stepped out onto the street and was immediately swept into Melbourne's morning energy. The CBD was busy with commuters and early tourists, people moving with purpose, the workday beginning. Trams rumbled past on their tracks, green and yellow or newer white models, all of them labelled with their route numbers, part of the extensive network that made Melbourne so easy to navigate. Lyla decided to start by walking through the city centre, to get a sense of Melbourne's layout and character before venturing into the neighbourhoods. She walked along Swanston Street, one of the main thoroughfares, watching the city reveal itself. The architecture was fascinating in its variety. Victorian-era buildings with elaborate facades and ironwork stood next to modernist towers of glass and steel. The scale shifted constantly, intimate laneways barely wide enough for two people, then broad avenues lined with trees, then hidden arcades and passages connecting different streets. She turned down one of the famous laneways, Centre Place, and found herself in a different world. The narrow passage was lined with cafes and restaurants, their tables spilling out onto the cobblestones, graffiti art covering the walls in vibrant colors and complex designs, the whole space feeling intimate and creative, more European than Australian in character. A cafe called her attention, its entrance small but inviting, the smell of fresh coffee irresistible. She went in and ordered a flat white Melbourne's signature coffee drink. The barista, a young woman with colourful tattoos and a friendly smile, prepared it with practiced skill, creating perfect microfoam, pouring it with a flourish that created a pattern on the surface. "First time in Melbourne?" she asked as she handed Lyla the cup. "Yes, just arrived yesterday." Welcome, you're going to love it. The weather's being kind today. Sometimes April can be all over the place. You exploring the city? That's the plan, Lyla said. Any recommendations? Definitely check out Fitzroy if you haven't yet. Brunswick Street has great shops and cafes, very Melbourne. And the laneways around here are worth exploring. Everyone's different. Lyla thanked her and took her coffee to a small table by the window, where she could watch the laneways activity. People hurried past, some stopping at other cafes, some cutting through on their way to somewhere else. A street artist was adding to a mural, his spray paint creating new layers over old work, the constant evolution that kept Melbourne's street art scene vital. The coffee was exceptional, smooth and rich, the milk perfectly textured, the temperature exactly right. She sipped it slowly, feeling herself settling into Melbourne's rhythm, the pace that was energetic but not frantic, purposeful but not rushed. After finishing, she continued her exploration of the laneways. Each one had its own character. De Grave Street with its European cafe culture, AC/DC Lane with its rock and roll heritage and band posters, Hosier Lane famous for its graffiti art that covered every surface, constantly changing as artists added new work. She spent time in Hosier Lane, walking slowly, looking at the art. Some pieces were elaborate murals with social or political messages. Others were tags and throw-ups in the traditional graffiti style. Some were stencil work with intricate detail. The lane felt like an outdoor gallery, democratic and ever-changing, art accessible to everyone. Other visitors were there too, photographing the walls, and Lyla noticed that people posed in front of their favorite pieces, making themselves part of the art. The interaction between viewer and work encouraged rather than forbidden. Emerging from the laneways, she made her way to Federation Square, Melbourne's controversial but beloved public space. The architecture was striking and divisive, angular geometric forms covered in zinc and sandstone, some people loving it, others finding it jarring. But the space itself was undeniably successful, filled with people, hosting events and exhibitions, providing a gathering place in the heart of the city. She walked through the square, looking at the various galleries and venues, then crossed the Yarra River on the pedestrian bridge. From the middle of the bridge, she could see both directions, upstream toward the city's origins, downstream toward the bay. The river was brown and steady, flanked by paths and parks, a natural corridor through the urban landscape. On the Southbank, the Southbank promenade stretched along the river, lined with restaurants and cafes, street performers and artists selling their work. The atmosphere was relaxed and festive, people out enjoying the autumn weather, the river providing a natural focus. She walked along the promenade, watching a juggler entertain a small crowd, his routine polished and engaging. Further along, a saxophonist played jazz standards, his tone warm and melodic, the music mixed with conversation and laughter, the sound of the city at leisure. The views across to the CBD were excellent from here, the towers rising on the far bank, the historic buildings visible between them, the layers of Melbourne's development readable in the skyline. She found a bench and sat for a while, watching the river and the city, enjoying the mild sun. She decided to take a tram into one of the inner neighborhoods. She crossed back over the river and found a tram stop, studying the map to figure out which route would take her to Fitzroy. A tram arrived within minutes, Route 11, and she boarded, tapping her payment card on the reader. The tram was moderately busy, a mix of locals and tourists, everyone swaying slightly as the tram moved, the ride comfortable and smooth despite the rattling sound. She found a seat by the window and watched Melbourne pass by, the CBD giving way to lower buildings, the commercial areas transitioning to residential, the character of the city changing block by block. The tram travelled along roads lined with Victorian-era terraces, their iron lacework decorative and distinctive, many painted in bright colours. Front gardens were small but well tended, and many houses had solar panels on their roofs, Melbourne's environmental consciousness visible in this practical detail. She got off at Brunswick Street, the main artery through Fitzroy, and immediately felt the neighbourhood's different energy. This was bohemian Melbourne, vintage clothing stores and independent bookshops, organic grocers and vegetarian cafes, record shops and galleries showing local artists. The street was busy with a younger crowd, students and artists, young professionals and creative types, everyone contributing to the neighbourhood's alternative atmosphere. Music spilled from open doors, various genres mixing, indie rock, electronic, jazz, hip-hop, creating an eclectic soundtrack. Lyla walked slowly along Brunswick Street, stopping to look in shop windows, occasionally going inside to browse. A bookstore specializing in poetry and small press publications caught her attention, its shelves packed with work by Australian writers, many of them from Melbourne. She bought a slim volume of poems about the city, wanting something to remember this place by. Further along, she found a vintage store with clothing from various decades, the racks organized by era and style. The owner, an older woman with impeccable style herself, greeted her warmly and encouraged her to look around. Lyla admired the curation but didn't buy anything, content to appreciate without acquiring. The neighborhood's residential streets branched off Brunswick Street, and she walked down a few, seeing how people lived here. The terrace houses were beautiful, many restored with care, their original details preserved. Cast iron verandas, ornate balconies, colored glass in doorways. Front gardens ranged from wild and cottage-like to minimalist and modern, each reflecting their owners' personalities. She passed a community garden where people were working, tending vegetables and flowers, creating green space in the urban environment. Someone called out a greeting, and she waved back, the friendliness casual and genuine. It was approaching lunchtime, and she was ready to eat. She found a café on a quieter side street, its entrance marked by a chalkboard listing the day's specials. Inside it was cozy and welcoming, with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls, the kind of place that felt like someone's living room. She ordered the lunch special, a Buddha bowl with roasted vegetables, quinoa, tahini dressing, and avocado. For drink, she chose a kombucha, the menu listing several locally made varieties. The waiter, a young man with a friendly demeanor, brought her water and confirmed her order. "The Buddha bowl's great today," he said. "Everything's organic, most of it from a farm just outside the city. The tomatoes are especially good right now." The food arrived beautifully presented, a bowl full of colors and textures, roasted sweet potato and beets, fresh greens, the tahini dressing creamy and nutty. It was healthy and delicious, exactly right for the mild autumn day, and she ate slowly, enjoying each component. At the next table, two women were discussing a book they'd both read, their conversation animated and thoughtful. The cafe had that Melbourne energy she was coming to recognize, intellectual and creative, casual but engaged, people taking time to really be present rather than rushing through meals. After lunch, she decided to walk to Carlton, the neighbouring suburb, to see the University of Melbourne area. The walk took her through residential streets where autumn was more visible. Trees showing gold and red, leaves beginning to fall, the light slanting through branches in that distinctive autumn way. Carlton revealed itself as more genteel than Fitzroy, its streets wider, its houses larger, the university's presence evident in the student housing and academic buildings. She walked along Lygon Street, Melbourne's Little Italy, where Italian restaurants and cafes had been serving the community for generations. The street smelled wonderful: coffee and fresh bread, pizza baking, espresso machines hissing. She passed cafes where older Italian men sat playing cards, their conversations in Italian, traditions continuing in this new country, adapted but recognizable. She found herself drawn to the university campus, its grounds beautiful, with historic buildings and mature trees. Students sat on lawns studying or talking, that timeless campus scene of youth and learning. She walked through the grounds, admiring the architecture. Gothic Revival buildings in bluestone, their towers and arches romantic and substantial. By mid-afternoon, she felt ready to head back toward the CBD, to see it in different light, to experience the city as the workday wound down. She caught a tram back, this time on a different route, that took her through different streets, offering new perspectives on the city. Back in the CBD, the energy was shifting. Workers were finishing for the day, meeting colleagues for after-work drinks, heading to the gym or to dinner. The laneways were busier now, the bars opening, music and conversations spilling out onto the narrow passages. Lyla walked to the State Library of Victoria, wanting to see the reading room she'd heard was one of Melbourne's most beautiful spaces. The library's exterior was impressive, a classical building with columns and a large lawn in front where people sat enjoying the late afternoon. Inside, she made her way to the La Trobe reading room, and when she entered, she understood the praise. The room was magnificent, octagonal, with a high domed ceiling, rows of desks radiating from the center, natural light flooding in from above. The space was quiet and focused, people studying and reading, the atmosphere reverent. She sat for a while, just absorbing the space, feeling the history of all the people who had studied here, all the knowledge that had been pursued within these walls. The reading room represented something essential about Melbourne, she thought. The value placed on learning and culture, the civic pride evident in creating and maintaining beautiful public spaces. When she left the library, the evening was approaching. The light was golden now, the sun lowering, the day's warmth beginning to fade. She walked toward the Yarra again, wanting to see the river in this different light. The Southbank promenade was busier now, people out for dinner, the restaurants filling up. She found a spot along the railing and stood watching the river and the city. The towers across the water were catching the evening light, their glass facades glowing gold and orange, and the sky was beginning its transformation toward sunset. She decided to walk along the river path, following the Yarra as it curved through the city. The path was busy with joggers and walkers, cyclists commuting home, everyone making use of this corridor through the urban landscape. Trees along the path were showing autumn colors, their leaves backlit by the lowering sun, creating a canopy of gold. She walked until she reached a pedestrian bridge, and crossed back to the north side, finding herself in a quieter area where the city felt more intimate, less tourist-focused. Small bars and restaurants occupied ground floors of buildings, neighborhood places where locals gathered. She found a wine bar that looked welcoming, its entrance understated, its interior visible through large windows. She went in and was greeted by the bartender, a woman about her age with a warm manner. "Evening, just yourself?" "Yes, please." "Welcome. Here's our list. Everything's Australian, mostly Victorian wines. Let me know if you'd like any recommendations." Lyla studied the list and chose a Pinot Noir from the Yarra Valley, the wine region just outside Melbourne. The bartender poured it generously and brought it with a small plate of cheese and crackers. "On the house," she said. "You look like you've been exploring. How was your day?" "Wonderful," Lyla said. "I walked through Fitzroy and Carlton, saw some of the laneways, the State Library. Melbourne's beautiful." "It's a good city," the bartender agreed. "Easy to love. Enjoy your wine." Lyla sat at a small table by the window, sipping the wine, earthy and complex, distinctly Australian, and watching the street outside. The evening activity was building, people meeting friends, heading to dinner, the neighborhood coming alive in its evening aspect. She thought about the day, about Melbourne's layers and neighborhoods, each with its own character, but all connected by the tram network and the river, by the coffee culture and the street art, by the values that seem to define the city: creativity and livability, culture and sport, environmentalism and multiculturalism, all of it somehow working together. The wine bar filled gradually with locals, people greeting each other, clearly regulars. Conversations flowed around her, discussions of work and plans, relationships and politics, the ordinary concerns of life happening in this pleasant space. When she finished her wine, she paid and stepped back out into the evening. The light had faded now, streetlights creating pools of illumination, the city in its nighttime mode. She walked slowly back toward her hotel, taking a route that led through more laneways, seeing them transformed by darkness and artificial light. The laneways at night had a different magic, the graffiti art illuminated by streetlights, creating dramatic shadows and highlights. Bars and restaurants glowed from within, their interiors warm and inviting. Music leaked from doorways, live bands playing in small venues, the sound mixing with conversation and laughter. She passed a tiny bar, barely more than a corridor, packed with people enjoying themselves, everyone pressed close but no one seeming to mind, the intimacy part of the appeal. She passed a restaurant where diners sat at a communal table, sharing dishes family style, strangers becoming friends over food and wine. Back at her hotel, she didn't go straight to her room. Instead, she went up to the rooftop bar, wanting one last view of Melbourne before ending the day. The rooftop was quiet, just a few other people enjoying the evening, and the view was spectacular. The CBD spread out below, lights marking streets and buildings, the Yarra, a dark ribbon winding through, and beyond it all, the suburbs stretching away, a vast constellation of lights extending toward the distant mountains. She ordered a herbal tea, chamomile with honey, and found a comfortable chair where she could see the city. The night air was cool now, autumn asserting itself, but pleasant, refreshing after the day's walking. Melbourne glowed below her, and she could trace her day's journey in the pattern of lights. The CBD where she'd started, the laneways hidden from this height but present in memory, Southbank along the river, the inner neighborhoods she'd explored, each with its own character and energy, all of them contributing to the whole. She thought about what made Melbourne special, what distinguished it from other cities she'd visited. Part of it was the livability, the way the city was designed for people, rather than just commerce, the parks and cafes, the tram network and the laneways, the neighborhoods with their distinct identities. Part of it was the culture, the creativity visible in street art and independent businesses, in the coffee culture and the literary scene, in the value placed on arts and sports equally. But perhaps most of all, it was the balance Melbourne struck, big enough to be cosmopolitan and diverse, small enough to feel accessible and intimate, urban but green, modern but historically aware, serious about culture but not pretentious about it. A city comfortable with itself, confident in its identity, welcoming to visitors but not dependent on them. The tea warmed her hands, and she sipped it slowly, in no hurry to finish, content to sit with her thoughts and the view. Other people on the rooftops spoke in low voices, respecting the evening quiet, everyone seeming to understand that some moments were better appreciated in relative silence. A tram clanged past on the street far below, its sound carrying clearly in the night air, and Lyla smiled. That sound would always remind her of Melbourne now, would trigger memories of this day and this city, the coffee and the laneways, the river and the neighborhoods, the autumn light and the friendly people, the sense of having discovered a place that understood how to create urban beauty, that valued culture and livability equally, that managed to be both sophisticated and relaxed, both cosmopolitan and distinctly Australian. The night deepened, stars appearing in the clear autumn sky, and Melbourne continued its evening life below, the city vibrant and alive, offering its pleasures to residents and visitors alike, generous and welcoming, asking nothing except that you be present, that you appreciate, that you allow yourself to be curious and calm and happy in its streets and lanes and spaces, discovering its character at your own pace, finding your own Melbourne in the vast tapestry of experiences it offered.